Welcome to the SitRep for today, which is the 23rd of May 2022. This is your SitRep. This is where I go through the situation and give you a report. For those who didn't understand what SitRep stood for. The situation report. What's going on in the world? What's happening? Let's have a look at things and then go, what should we be doing? What should we be doing to better prepare ourselves for the coming things, for the coming stuff and things that are going to happen in the world? So, what are you doing in 10 weeks' time? I think we're at 10 months. I meant 10 weeks. I have to amend that on YouTube. 10 weeks. What are you doing in 10 weeks' time? When's 10 weeks? That's like 2.5 months away. So let us think about this. We're in May, towards the end of May. So we're going to fast forward June, July, August. What are you doing in August? Well, possibly you're going to be starving to death. All right. So what's going on here? Experts have started to warn that the world has about 10 weeks supply of wheat remaining unless global powers intervene, and they're talking about intervening specifically into the Ukrainian crisis, the war in Ukraine. So a number of people have actually come out overnight and warned about this. We've got who we got? UN. We have some minister from some part of the world. From the Ukraine. There's another one, which I think was Serbian. My bad. Serbian president has also come out. Serbian president came out and said that a quarter of the world's population could run short of food if the war in Ukraine continues for much longer, and it probably will. Just FYI, little heads up, my little take on it, probably going to continue on for a little bit longer. So, we really need to start looking at this and start thinking, okay, what's happened to the world food supply? How have we got to this point? But, it's pretty obvious how we've got to this point. We've had an interconnected system for a long time now, which is economically advantageous for most countries. If you don't believe that globalization is economically beneficial for countries, then have a look at Argentina. Argentina is a country that for the last probably almost 100 years should have been one of the most dominant countries in the world. They had all the factors that every other country that became dominant in the world had. They were kicking butt, and then they had they had in particular one president who pretty much turned it all around and said, no, we're actually going to become self-sufficient. We're going to do our own thing. We're not going to export our stuff off. We're not going to buy stuff from overseas. And in an environment where every other country in the world did do that, they got crippled. So right now, for example, it is more beneficial for a Argentinian to buy US dollars and to stick them literally under their mattress. That is what they do. They buy US dollars and literally put them under the mattress. And because the government then figured out that people are doing this, they put a ban on US dollars. So now they have to buy them through the black market. So they're buying US dollars at double the rate of what they should be and putting them under their mattress. And that is actually saving them money. It is smarter to invest in a used car in Argentina than it is to keep money in the bank right now. Has been for a long way. Anyway, how'd they get into that situation? Because they didn't have that interconnected system. All the rest of us, we had the interconnected system. It was advantageous for us to get our stuff made over in China or to import, certain products from different parts of the world. And that's fine. That's great. Everyone was happy. Everyone was making money until we can't get those things from overseas, until China decides, you know what? We don't like this sickness, and we're just going to lock down 26 million people tonight. FYI, I did a little heads up on that it looked like it was easing. Well, reports today look like it is not easing in China. It looks like it's getting worse over in China. Their lockdowns are getting more and more severe now. So there was a little glimmer of hope where they're like, hey, we're opening up the subway. People can start moving around in the city at least. And I was looking at it and going, oh, this could be good. We could start getting ships moving and maybe we're going to get through this quagmire. Now, today, it doesn't look like that's the case. China looks like it's locking down harder than before. And, so that issue there on that side of the house is going to get worse. But I'm talking about Ukraine and Russia, and in particular, the wheat that they export and the fertilizer that they export. And we'll chuck Belarus in there as well. Whether they like it or not, they're part of this. So this is getting really out of hand. We're having a big problem with feeding the world at the moment, or about to have a huge problem with feeding the world. If you don't think there's a problem feeding the world right now, go check out some videos on Sri Lanka. Check out what's happening in Sri Lanka today, right now. They are rioting, and they have been for weeks. They are tearing apart their own politicians. And I'm not speaking metaphorically either. This isn't like, oh, yes, they're bringing down their politicians. They are literally going into their houses, pulling them out into the street and tearing them limb from limb. They are burning their cars. They are throwing cars into rivers. It is utter fucking mayhem in Sri Lanka right now. And that is, there's a number of issues there. They have no money. They can't get fuel in. They have no food, or they're running out of food, and they have no medicines. They can't get access to medicines. That's a big issue. Food probably being the big one there. So what do we do as Australians? We need to start to look at this, and we need to start to think about this. Okay, what are those things that I just mentioned there? Fuel, your ability to create energy, essentially. So fuel your vehicles, move around a space, power your house and power all the goods and things like that you have in the house. That's something you might want to start thinking about. Food, that's a pretty big one you want to start thinking about. A lot of the riots that we're seeing around the world at the moment, I think, are fueled, and I use that tongue in cheek, by the lack of food. That it's actually the fact that human beings aren't fueled, that they're rioting, that they're destroying their own city, that they're killing people in these riots. So, how do we insulate ourselves from this effect? We create that sort of system within ourselves. We have our own food system. We better start gardening. The world has 10 weeks worth of food left right now. Obviously, that's not an even blanket. This is a doona that has lumps in some places, and it's very thin in other places. So what we'll start to see is more and more countries that are doing what Iran's doing right now, what Sri Lanka's doing right now, what Peru has been doing. We'll see more and more countries falling into that zone where they're starting to tear the country apart because they can't feed themselves and feed their families. And we'll see other countries like Australia, like the US, that have a bit more fat in the system. But we're going to see more chaotic times ahead, and this is definitely something we need to start thinking about. How do we improve our own resilience as individuals, as families, as communities? Need to start working together, need to start plugging in with our communities. I'm hoping everyone's sort of like woken up now on Monday and gone like, well, Australia hasn't rapidly changed, and there aren't magic rainbows and unicorns walking down the street just because we had a fucking election. It's like, oh yeah, well, we had an election, and now what? Whoa, we've changed everything. No, nothing's changed. Just continue doing what we're doing. Continue preparing. Continue as an individual to build self-reliance and resilience within your own life and within your family's life and within your community around you. That's what we should be focusing on mainly. And looking at these sorts of things, looking at Sri Lanka, looking at that and going like, okay, well, what do we need to stockpile if things got worse? Food. Okay, let's build up some food. Let's start thinking about, can we grow our own food? Medicines. Okay, can we start to build up some medicines in our first aid kits, in our extended pantries, in our preparations? Can we have those medicines that maybe last a little bit longer and can have a little bit more of them on hand? Maybe start to think about doing buy-ups of certain medications that you might need, and starting off with, is there anything that I require to function, to live. Okay, so there are some people out there who might be diabetic. Can I start to have more of that medicine, even though that is a perishable medicine? And we start to think about it like that. Okay, how do I store perishable medicines that I need to live? Can I freeze them? Are they ones that I can get frozen? Are they need to be kept cool? Okay, do they need to be kept cool? What does that mean that I need? I need fuel. I need electricity. I need power. So starting to think about that and all these systems and how they interconnect and how we can build that resilience into our own system. I don't know why I'm doing this a lot today. Think about the spider web, the interconnected thing. I've been drinking coffee and like drawing up lines. Yes, this is connected to this and we need to do this. And then looking at medicines. Okay, do I need medicines for my mental well-being or something like that? There's a lot of people who are on anti-anxiety, antidepressants, maybe even antipsychotics. So can I get more of a store of those? Then thinking about, okay, well, what medicines do I use regularly? Do I use paracetamol? Do I use ibuprofen? All these sorts of handy things. Hey, can I even get some antibiotics? It's a tough one. I used to store up antibiotics all the time. And I've noticed over the past 10 years of me doing that, it's been more and more difficult for me to just go to a doctor and go like, hey, dude, I go overseas, or hey, man, or hey, gender, hey, doctor, how does that sound? Can I go overseas all the time? I go into these dangerous places, and can I get some antibiotics just to have on hand, just in case? And usually they're like, yep, that's cool, that's no worries. And it's got increasingly difficult. I remember actually at the start of the pandemic of the sea flu that we had, I went into a chemist and said, and I'd been doing some research and stuff, and I'd seen some things about the IVA, the horse dewormer thing. And I knew that this was something that I could get access to a couple of months ago because it was used for parasitic, I think, uses. And so it was in my wheelhouse. It was something that I'd known about, and it was kind of part of the preps. And I thought, sometimes I'd take antiparasitic medicines if I was going to some parts of the world where parasites were a big problem. And I went in there and they're like, no, you can't get it. I was like, oh, okay, because I go overseas a lot, and they're like, no, not happening. So they were quite quick on that, actually. Like they shot that one down pretty quick. But anyway, it's more difficult to get these things, but it's not impossible. And certainly you can inquire about it. To my knowledge, there's no online versions that you can get. I know there's a company called Jace Medicine or Jace Medical that deliver packets, like travel packs of things like antibiotics, but as far as I know, it's only in Canada and the US at the moment that they're shipping to. But these are things that we want to start thinking about: medicines, food, water, energy, all that kind of stuff. 10 weeks worth of wheat left, unless you're in China. Apparently they've got 2 years of it. Good for them. All right, what else we got in the news? Monkeypox outbreaks explodes across Europe. Scientists left baffled. How could this happen? Well, whenever you're baffled, you should check your premise. Check your premise. If you're baffled by something and it doesn't make sense, then check what the underlying premise, the underlying information that you're taking as an assumption. So I would look at this and go, okay, if the assumption is we're dealing with a mysterious monkeypox outbreak, and we know that monkeypox only spreads via usually touch. It can be airborne, but it needs to be passed across skin barrier, usually with a small cut or something in the skin, so that it can actually land as an infection into the host. And we're getting this happen all over the place. Well, are people rubbing their sores against each other? Like, what's happening here? Check your premise. Maybe this isn't actually what you think it is. Maybe this might not be monkeypox. That would be where I would start, at least. And that's I'm not a infectious disease expert in any sense of the word. I am a health scientist, but more in the exercise field. But I understand how the human body works to a rough standard, I guess. enough to be like, I guess, a bush mechanic version of a scientist. But that's what I would look at. I go, this is interesting. Maybe we're dealing with something else here, or maybe this is getting passed in some way that we can't see at the moment. But Belgium begins monkeypox quarantine. So, and Biden comes out and warns that everyone should be worried. Everyone should be concerned, I think was his words. So as I said, the last couple of days, this is something that we probably need to keep our eye on, keep looking at it, think about the second and third order effects of it too, lockdowns, what are the effects of lockdowns, blah, 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 maybe even riots coming out of this as well. Best prepare ourselves for this sort of thing, best prepare yourself for the possibility that you might be shut down again, that our society might be locked down again, which is never a pleasant thought. And yes, all right, there's the whole should or shouldn't we do that, and I'm not even going to go into that. I'm just sort of thinking, like, if I get shut down into my house again, do I have enough food here to survive? Do I have enough, water? Do I have enough entertainment to survive? That's another big lesson I think we should be taking out of the last pandemic is, can I keep myself sane? There's only so many dogs you can buy, and only so many babies that you can have before you actually have to face the hard reality of dealing with yourself for a little while. So maybe consider putting some time into that as well, into the psychological side. All right, let's talk about some storm stuff as well. There's a couple of little storms that popped up. I'm always about these weather effects. And interesting weather effects too. We've got a few across the world. We've got one in Canada, one in the US, one in Germany. I mean, there was heaps more. These are just the ones that I grabbed. But Ontario, is that the French-speaking part? Ontario. That was more Spanish, wasn't it? That was like Antonio Banderas going to Canada. Ontario had some deadly storms rip through, leaving at least 2 dead. There were tornadoes in, where do you reckon? Not the US, no, in Germany. In Germany, leaving 40 injured. So massive storms in Ontario, in Canada, tornadoes in Germany, and more tornadoes. There was tornadoes in the US, in Michigan. Now, my knowledge of Tornado Alley and the tornado-prone areas within the US is not like super fantastic, but it's usually within the plains. It's usually places like Oklahoma and that, which is kind of Midwest area. Michigan is not, to my knowledge, in that area. It might border on it, so that could be part of it. But Michigan is more up near the Great Lakes. In my mind, at least, it's more of a northern area. I don't know if tornadoes are prolific in this area. Please correct me if I am wrong. If you are from Michigan or from the US and you know more about these weather effects than I do. But it seems interesting that this is specifically in northern Michigan as well. So I'm imagining it's probably up near the Great Lakes, which is, relatively north, the northern part of the US. Seems odd to me that they're having these weather effects there. But what we're seeing is a whole heap of weather effects that are happening outside their usual, like, contained area. And I think this is what we're going to see more and more in the future, is that we're going to see strange, or what we would deem strange weather effects in areas that we wouldn't think that it would happen. I think the weather systems are becoming more intense and fluctuating, might be the way to put it. So things are going up and down more. We'll see snow in areas that we don't normally see it, i.e. what happened in Texas last year, where they had a massive snowstorm. And I think I was talking to someone from Texas not too long ago, and they reckon they almost had one this year as well. We're going to see tornadoes in areas where tornadoes don't usually form, because there's specific weather effects that need to happen, specific conditions that need to be met in order for a tornado to form. We'll start to see things like in Australia. I think we'll start to see hurricanes, which are normally pretty prolific. We've got a hurricane kind of season that hits in Queensland, and it's usually that northern part of Queensland. We'll start to see them hit a bit more further south. We'll start to see them maybe more hitting into the west of the country as well. I don't know that for a fact, but this is just what I'm kind of like looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to it as in like, oh wow, I'm really looking forward to being smashed by some wind and rain. I'm trying to predict into the future. I'm looking at weather patterns and how things are happening at the moment. I'm going, things to me appear like they seem to be going a bit more crazy. And so what can I do to prepare? I can start to think about my area and what might happen. I highly doubt I'd get tornadoes in my area. I think probably the conditions would have to be pretty extreme for that to happen. But I actually live above sea level, which is kind of rare for an Australian because most of us live at the sea. For a tornado to happen, I don't think so. But inland flooding, inland tsunamis is certainly something that I'm starting to think about in the future. More intense storm damage, yes, definitely. And then the old perennial bushfire season in Australia too. I think there'll be more intense and more of those. But this is something I think this is a realistic threat. Okay, so everything else I think is at some point like not super likely. When you a lot of preppers are like, oh, nuclear fallout. We got to look at what happens when we have nuclear fallout or fucking asteroids hitting the Earth or aliens landing or something like that. I'm like, that's cool, but on the likelihood consequence scale, like I'm always like likelihood. I don't know. I just can't get myself to really think that these things are super likely. I think there's a chance of some of these things happening, especially when we're starting to talk about nukes and the situation that we see in the world at the moment. I think there is a chance that these things could happen, and we should think about that and we should prepare for that. But what I'm going to prepare for first and foremost are the things that are very likely to happen. What's the most likely thing that's going to happen to you in your lifetime? Probably in the next 10 years. Well, if you drive a vehicle, it's going to be a vehicle accident. So do you have the stuff in your car right now to help mend someone in a vehicle accident? Do you have first aid kits in your car? Do you have the things in your first aid kit that are equivalent to the types of injuries that you would see in a motor vehicle accident? Well, if not, maybe that's where you should start preparing. Forget about digging the bunker for a day and just go out and buy a first aid kit. Just FYI, and I have no affiliation to this company at all, and you can think that they suck if you want, but I just happen to have one here. I did notice this morning that I've got a number of these kits. This is from Survival First Aid. Yes, I realize that's backwards when you look at it. Survival First Aid, Aussie company. I think they're having a 50% off sale at the moment, end of financial year, like everyone else. But I've got a number of their kits. They're not like, I'm not like, this is the best kit ever. It's just a cool, handy kit that's got a lot of stuff in it. It's clearly labeled. I do put other things in there because I like to add stuff to kits and play around with stuff and replace certain things. But if you're just a beginner and you just want a good all-round sort of first aid kit, jump on their website, check them out. They're pretty cool. Again, I've absolutely zero affiliation with these guys. They don't even know I exist. So I just, when I see good products and I like good products, I will tell you about them. All right. So anyway, I was talking about motor vehicle accidents and shit like that. But what I'm actually talking about here is likelihood versus consequence on a risk management scale for security or safety or prepping or whatever you want to call it. So the next thing up that I look at and go, okay, what are some large scale events that could happen? Well, weather events are one of the big things. I think it's increasingly likely that you will be caught in some sort of weather event in the next 12 to 18 months. So if you're not preparing for that, then I would suggest that you want to put some thought towards that. And that could be a number of things, but you need to look at where you live in the world and what the likelihood of those weather effects might be. As I said, for me, floods, fire, just about everything else Australian. I've got some questions on the YouTubes. Hello, Danielle. How are you? Desperate situation in Sri Lanka. People think that can never happen in the United States. And when you talk to people about stocking up and preparing, they treat you as if you're overreacting. Yes, absolutely they do, Danielle. I have experienced this for years now. Well over 10 years. But, at some point also, I don't really care. Like, I'll continue telling people that I think that people should be prepared, and I don't care if they think I'm crazy or whatever. It's one of the big blessings I think that came out of the pandemic was all of a sudden people were like, oh, shit does run out at the supermarket sometimes. Sometimes I can't access the things that I want to at the time that I want to. Wow, things can go wrong on a global scale. Okay, I think I start to get it now. For you in the US, I think one of the big things that I'm looking at the moment is riots and demonstrations. I'm seeing a fractious society. I'm seeing that everywhere around the world, but it is really hyper exemplified in the US at the moment. So that's one thing I would be planning for if I lived over there. I'd be really thinking about that. If I was doing a trip to the US this year, and I'm not planning on it, but I had to toss up between that and another country, and I just chose another country and I just booked the flight. So probably not going to the US this year, unfortunately, because I would love to go there. But if I was going there, I would be taking certain kits. I was pulling apart a grab bag. I got a new bag the other day, so I'm building a grab bag around me. That's why I'm like pulling up all this stuff from down here. But this here is one of my grab bags as an example. I've got different versions of this. This is kind of like a mini riot gear bag, and this one's just goggles that are actually sealed and they're neon green, so I can look cool to protect the eyeballs. Gas mask. You merely adopted the darkness. I was born into it. And spare filters as well for that. So if I was going somewhere dangerous, I'd actually pull those filters out. I keep them sealed in plastic so they're not exposed to the air, but I would actually put them onto the gas mask and then probably seal that. Might look at doing that today, actually, just reseal it, vacuum seal it. But anyway, that's the sort of stuff that I would be thinking about, is that kind of gas mask gear. I'd be thinking about what can I do to keep myself safe from riots and things like that. If I was in and around the US, if I was operating in the US at the moment, particularly around major cities. Not so much if I was out in towns and things like that, but smaller towns, smaller cities. But those big major cities, and I'd be looking at the historical data there. I'd be going, okay, what has happened here? How did it happen here? So if I lived in and around, I don't know, Portland, like there's no chance in hell that I would ever live around Portland. But if I did for some reason, then this is something I'd be looking at. I'd be like, how have people reacted here in the past? What sort of things have kicked them off? All that sort of stuff. And then I'd be looking for that to actually happen. Obviously in the US at the moment, there's an issue that is like scraping tinder into the box at the moment, and there's sparks flying around us. It's just ready to go off. So I don't think in any way you are overreacting, Danielle. I think if you're preparing right now, then you are smarter and you're going to be ahead of the curve of probably about 98% at least of the population. Lauren, my good friend Lauren, how do you know what has mask work for? Riot stuff, not just paint or whatever. Is it all the same? It is not the same. No, not all gas masks are created equal. They're all for different things, and you can get different types of filters. So ideally, you just want to hedge your bets. Go get an NBC filter, which is a nuclear biological chemical filter. They're big, thick filters. They've got charcoal portions in them and a few other types of filters in them. And they kind of protect against everything. They're your best bet. But if you're going into a riot specifically, you need to think about what you're actually protecting against. So if we're talking about gases, we've got vapor, generally speaking, or I know in Australia at least, we've got a whole heap of different types of filters that you can get, but organic vapor would be one of the main ones you can get, and you've got particle ones. So generally what you're going to find is particle ones will be the easiest ones to access. Will they stop 100% of riot control agents, i.e. gas and capsicum spray and stuff like that? No, they will not. So they're designed to stop against particles. Now, and that they are designated P1, P2, or P3, or P2.5, P3. And you should be familiar with that because we all would have been exposed to particle filter masks in the great pandemic of 2020. Being that getting a P2 mask was the standard, P3 is actually out there, so you can get that as well. Now, organic vapors, what are they going to protect against? That's more like it says on the box, organic vapors. So if we're thinking about a capsicum spray that is an organic vapor, that might be what we want to hedge our bet and get that one if we're going into places that have gas in them. However, I will say this, and there are people that disagree with me on this all the time, and that's fine. You can disagree. I've been in riots though. A gas mask with a filter will protect you to a certain extent against everything because it's stopping stuff getting in. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to go down the rabbit hole of like, this one works for this and this works for that and that doesn't work for that. If you want to, you can. But if you have any sort of mask on, even if, and I teach this on courses, if you're stuck without anything else, a bandana or something just wrapped around you, a scarf wrapped around you, especially if you wet it down beforehand, will protect you to a certain extent against things like riot control agents. Because how they actually work, interestingly enough, is that they've got tiny little crystals that react with fluid. They react most effectively with mucous membranes. So they float around in the air and they get in your mucous membranes, in your eyes, up in your nose, into your throat, and they react then and create an intense burning sensation. So that's what's actually working. So anything you can do to stop that getting on you, these are trendy as. I might wear these for the rest of today. So anything that you can do that actually physically stops that from touching you and getting on your skin is going to be great. So this is a version of a kit that I've got, which is a small version. I've got a full face gas mask as well that has much bigger filters on it. And in that particular kit, I've also got a mop suit, or it's one of those suits that's actually, I guess you'd probably use it for like painters and stuff would use it, but it stops everything. So I can chuck that on, and then I've got rubber gloves, and then I've got thicker outer rubber gloves as well. So that's kind of like my, what would you call it? Nuclear fallout version, or intense pathogen, biological attack suit or kit. But that's a bigger kit, and I'm not going to stick that in a grab bag. This here crumples down into something, sort of the size of my fist, basically, once I fold it all in there and stick it down. So yeah, anyway, I don't know where I was going today. I thought I was going to get on and talk for about 5 minutes, and it's probably been like half an hour now. But yeah, that's what you're looking at. You can get specific filters that work specifically for riot control agents. Getting your hands on them could be a bit difficult. If you want the top mark, there's a company called Mira Safety, MIRA Safety. They operate out of the US. Their gas masks are great. They're very expensive. Their filters are great. They're very expensive. And shipping out to Australia is very expensive. And I know all this because I've done it. Or you could go down to your local like hardware store, or this particular stuff. All this I actually bought at a store called RSEA Safety, which is an Australian chain store that does like safety gear for tradies, essentially. So they have everything from full face masks to half face masks to just your P2 masks and everything in between. So you can go check them out. They're pretty cool. And it's not overly expensive to get it through them either. And, get access to what you can get, whatever you can actually afford. If you can't afford a $480 full face gas mask with two $80 filters, then, get what you can get. Go to Bunnings and get a $20 one. It's not going to do the same thing. But at the end of the day, like I said, when we're talking about riot control agents, it's about keeping the stuff off you primarily. The next sort of thing you want to be thinking about is how do I actually filter those agents out? And that's the next step up. Anyway, enough about that. So I'm going to wrap it up there. That's it for today. Hopefully that was helpful. Great questions. Thank you, everyone who put in questions or little comments today. I always appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us today and watching this, or watching it later if that's what you're doing. Just a reminder that the world is increasingly getting a crazier and crazier place. So please keep your eyes open when you're out there. Look out for threats. It's not inherently a bad place, but things are getting a little hairy at the moment. I'll put it that way. That's my view of it, at least. Keep prepping. Keep safe out there. Keep thinking about that food as well. Keep striving towards being a more self-reliant human being. And that is it for today. So until next time, gang, Semper Paratus.